In our previous videos, I discussed the meaning and vital importance of truthfulness and also gave a very brief review of the Arab-Israel conflict, which I tried to present as objectively as possible. In connection with this conflict, it's interesting that many people all over the world see Israel as a racist, warmongering, expansionist state that keeps killing innocent people and refuses to make peace with its neighboring countries. But how justified is Israel's inordinately bad reputation? After all, how can it be that one of the smallest countries in the world would keep challenging the enormous Arab world that has a population 50 times larger and which possesses a major share of the world's oil reserves, as well as active support from the rest of the over billion-strong Muslim world? Surely that doesn't make sense. In fact, one would expect that Israel would do whatever it can in order to live in peace with all the other nations in the Middle East. And actually, this is exactly what it has always tried to do. Many people seem to forget that Israel has repeatedly given up territories from which it had been attacked and even invaded in the past, only to be attacked from these same territories again. Sinai, with its oil fields and strategic depth, had been returned to Egypt on a number of occasions before finally signing a peace agreement. The Gaza Strip, southern Lebanon, and most of the West Bank have all been repeatedly relinquished by Israel, only to be attacked from these same territories again and again. But strangely, every time that Israel is forced to defend itself and retaliate, often doing so only after diplomacy fails, it is Israel that almost always bears the brunt of international censure, while the real instigators, whether they are the armies of neighboring countries or terrorist militias, seldom incur any real criticism from anyone. I'm not saying that Israel shouldn't be accountable for its actions. Of course it should, just like any other country. However, to put Israel's pariah status in perspective, Israel is condemned, not just censured, but condemned in various United Nations forums more often than all the other nations put together. And that includes the truly repressive, totalitarian, belligerent countries such as Sudan, Indonesia, Zimbabwe, North Korea, China, and many others. A major incrimination against Israel is its occupation of the West Bank since 1967. But what most people don't realize that this was a direct result of Jordan's attack and intended invasion of Israel. Incidentally, it was Jordan in 1948 that had prevented the establishment of the Arab state of Palestine alongside Israel, according to the United Nations Partition Resolution. It had prevented it by unilaterally annexing the entire West Bank during the course of that first Arab-Israel war. So to whom did these territories legally belong in 1967? To the Arabs of the West Bank, maybe? But this was not so clear-cut because of their earlier categorical rejection of the partition plan and their resort to destroy Israel in 1947. Nothing simple here. And to compound the issue is the fact that none of the many United Nations resolutions and other international conventions which are used to deny Israel's right to occupy the West Bank or build Jewish settlements there relate at all to the unique situation of the continuous aim of a large part of the Arab and Muslim world to destroy Israel, or the kind of terrorism that evolved with this quest. Also not addressed is the League of Nations 1922 resolution that calls for the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine and which was validated through the United Nations Charter. Despite all this, many Westerners, public figures and ordinary people are readily aroused to stage large protest demonstrations and boycotts directed almost exclusively against Israel, and thus identifying with the sentiments of those who strive zealously for its destruction. So what is the reason for this blinkered, one-sided approach? Well, there's oil, which the Arab countries have in greater supply than anyone else. Then there's the United Nations that has a very large number of Arab, Muslim and Third World member states that automatically form a strong anti-Israel bloc. There's also the devastation of Arab towns by Israel, seen on television and in newspapers whenever the conflict escalates, and that seldom offer much objective commentary on what prompted these bombings in the first place. And there might also be that age-old malady, anti-Semitism, nowadays masquerading as concern for the poor victimized Arabs in an updated anti-Israel twist. Whatever the reasons for Israel's uniquely bad name and the continuous international pressure on it to keep making unrequited compromises, whether it's through genuine ignorance or political and commercial expediency or unadulterated bias, Israel's lonely, desperate stand indicates a very unhappy future for this planet, because it shows that humanity on the whole doesn't understand the meaning of truthfulness, and accordingly we won't be able to cope with all the other serious existential threats and challenges. Because of the cynical promotion of half-truths and lies used by various interested parties, combined with public gullibility or indifference, pollution is not being adequately addressed. Neither are all the other global environmental and demographic issues. Militant jihad is making dangerous inroads everywhere, to mention just a few of the issues that mankind must address sensibly and promptly. For all this to happen, humanity needs to learn how to face facts honestly. People everywhere need to learn the vital importance of truthfulness and practice it earnestly. People need to be able to discern falsehood. These are not easy lessons, but they must be learned in order to ensure a decent future for all people everywhere. You can find out more in the book How to Avoid Armageddon, which is available through Amazon or from the publisher, Old Line Publishing, or you can ask at bookstores. Thank you.